Come on, camera.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. So today we're going to be talking about job searching with a disability and knowing your rights. My name is Catherine Barfell. I'm the Disability Services Coordinator here at UNT Dallas, and with me I have.
My name is Jacqueline Pope. I go by Jackie, and I'm the career advisor for the School of Human Services and the School of Liberal Arts and Sciences. And we're also joined by one more, which is our famous Bailey Bracken, who's championing online for us. And so I'll let her introduce herself as well.
Can you hear me? No, but hi, I guess, I don't know if you can see me. Nope, can't start it.
So whenever you're done, Bailey, because we're having difficulty on this side, if you mute, I'll know whenever you're finished.
Hey, yeah, we're good.
Perfect.
Awesome. So if y'all have any questions or comments, anything at all throughout the presentation, please don't hesitate to throw it in the chat. We're having issues, like Jackie said, being able to hear you all. So just feel free to let us know if you have any questions, but we will just jump right into it. So we first started, wanted to start out talking about finding an inclusive company, right? Because as a person with a disability, you would want to hopefully work somewhere that is inherently inclusive, or at least working toward being inclusive. And a company's diversity, equity, and inclusion statement is not always reality, as well as their ADA accommodation statements. They're just kind of mandated to have those, but that doesn't mean that the actual culture of the company is following along with that. So here are just kind of some tips and things to look out for to see if a company that you're interested in working for is going to be an inclusive space. So the first one is the mission statement. So do they have a statement apart from what's federally mandated about what they're doing to work toward an inclusive environment? Do they have different programs that they're working on? Do they get involved with the community? What is their greater vision apart from what they have to put? As well as looking at photos of employees, right? So the pictures that companies have on their marketing materials and things like that may not always be what the company actually looks like. So you could check out their social media, different pictures that they post about events that they've had, things like that. What does their employee base actually look like? As well as resource groups and councils. Do they have different groups put together of employees to work toward inclusion? Do they have a diversity board, something like that, apart from kind of what a lot of companies have? Are they going above and beyond in that way? And involvement with the community, what volunteer opportunities do they provide? What services are they involved with? What do they give to? Things like that. Is it aligned with what you're hoping to find within a company that you want to work for? And also language used both on their job posting and on their website. Are they using respectful language? Are they using outdated language? Are they up to date on what phrases and words and labels and things like that are the most appropriate and the least harmful to people? And checking their benefits. So this might be something that you may not have thought of before, but what do their benefits provide as far as disability leave, sick leave? Do they encourage you to actually use the time off? And are they understanding of needing to take time off for doctor's appointments, different medical issues, things like that? And asking questions and observing during the interview, right? So just how does the interview go? Do you feel comfortable? And are there questions that you want to ask specifically about accessibility or something like that? Even if they don't have maybe a full answer, how do they react to you asking those questions? That can say a lot about how the company is as a whole. And lastly, inclusive programming. So this kind of goes hand in hand with the like resource groups and councils, but what kind of programs and events do they put on for their employees and staff? What do they encourage things that are accessible? And if they're not, how do they go about making things more accessible? And Jackie, do you have anything to add to any of those?
So I think the biggest thing where you're looking, you have to make sure you know what you're valuing and you're looking for in a company. So just exactly what Catherine said, you don't necessarily want to only look at their diversity and equity inclusion, like their mission statement, but what does that company's culture look like? Again, a small company may not have as many resources, but their company's culture, it embraces change and growth. Whereas you may have a more established company that already has practices and ways they do things, so it may not be as inviting or welcoming. So again, it's just taking time to not just look at the statement, or like we've all probably heard or known or seen or in some capacity been told of what like their federal regulations may be. You want to make sure that you're actually looking at the company. And this is a great resource where you use Catherine. Guess what? You come to me and Bailey, we're going to go through this. But if it's even more comfortable just to kind of say, hey, Catherine, what do you think? Make sure that you're utilizing us for that, because again, you may see one thing, but it's always good to get a second opinion.
And so next we're going to talk about navigating the actual interview process. So you apply to a company after you kind of checked out their culture, checked out everything that you could, and you're like, yeah, I'm interested, I want to apply. And then you get asked to interview. Let's talk about some of the things that just kind of go into knowing your rights as a person with a disability in the interview process. So there are illegal questions for potential employers to ask per the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so some of these illegal questions are disability status. So the person interviewing you cannot ask if you have a disability or what disability you have, anything like that. That is illegal. You do not need to answer that. And I think also that would really speak to the culture of the company as well. So it would kind of be a red flag if they did ask about that. They cannot ask about past injuries or if you've received workers' compensation before. They cannot ask if you're taking any medications or what medications you're taking or what conditions you may be taking medications for. All of those are illegal questions to ask. They cannot ask about any accommodations you may need unless it is directly related to the job function. So, you know, for example, if you're applying to a job and on the essential functions, it says that you have to be able to lift like a 45-pound box. They can ask if you would be able to do that with or without reasonable accommodations because it's directly related to the job itself. But anything that is not directly related to job functions, they cannot ask if you would need or if you would be able to perform that with or without accommodations. As well as government benefits. They cannot ask if you are currently receiving government benefits, if you have in the past, or if you will in the future. They are not allowed to ask those things. And Jackie, do you have anything to add to those in particular?
Another thing with the legal questions, you're going to see age. So say for instance, if there may be a genetic disorder or an impairment that was just kind of progressive, sometimes people ask age to probe. So I want you to think of probing questions. Essentially interviews, the only function of an interview is to see of your abilities and knowledge to do whatever work is assigned. And so like Catherine said, if it's a physical job that maybe you work around machinery, you're gonna see they're gonna ask more questions like, say, can you pick this up? You know, are you able to do A, B, C, and D? But again, if it's not about the job, then it's probably gonna fall into this gray area where it could be deemed illegal. And again, like Catherine said, if you're noticing this, then maybe in part of this process, you're kind of picking up like, is this really a company I would want to work for? So just be mindful of age because there are some disabilities that are very age specific or it's progressive or whatever that may look like. So you don't have to answer questions about age. That is not a determinant unless it says 18 or older, but even then they should have the information when you apply. So that's the only thing else.
And also going off of that, they cannot ask about any genetic conditions that may run in your family, or even if like a family member has had breast cancer, for example, they cannot ask about those things either, because that is genetic discrimination and goes hand in hand with disability discrimination often as well. And the next one is accommodations for a job interview. So let's say that you need accommodations in order for the job interview itself to be accessible. So you would reach out to the hiring manager or the recruiter, whoever it is that you've been in the most contact with. And if they're not the right person to implement those accommodations, they will point you in the right direction. And I just want to remind you that you do not have to disclose the reason for the accommodation in the interview. And they should not be asking you about it either, except to make sure if it's, working and if it is an accessible environment for you. But you do not have to disclose the reason or condition that you are receiving the accommodation for. And finally, disclosing disability status. So I know that this can be a really difficult thing to navigate because you may want to talk about your disability and disclose it immediately in the interview because it's really inherent to your gifts and talents and things that you've experienced in your life and will be bringing to this potential job. But then also you may not want to disclose your disability status yet if you don't feel comfortable. So it's definitely something to think about and really consider. So these are just kind of some tips when you're kind of navigating that decision. But just as a reminder, you can disclose your disability status if you want to, but it is not required. Oftentimes, or I think on almost all job applications, it will ask you, and there's always the option to put prefer not to respond. And with that, you can put prefer not to respond and then decide to disclose it in the interview. That's totally fine. And there are a lot of different approaches to disclosing your disability status. And I'll let Jackie kind of pick up here because I feel like she's really good at talking about these points.
So when you're in an interview, and again, say for instance on the application, you say, I'm not going to disclose, and there's real reasons behind it. So your reasons behind it are valid. So you don't have to go through this like, should or shouldn't I? An employer, when you want to think of their perspective, all they're looking at is, can you do the work that is presented? So if it is maybe a physical limitation, a neurological limitation, whatever that may be, we would then want to prepare. So when we do like interview prep, this is where we have opportunity to prepare ourselves. So you either discuss about your disability when it comes to a part of an answer, where you can show strengths and areas of growth and your continuous growth and flexibility and adaptability. So whenever you interviews, we want to take it and not just say, hey, give me a shot because I know my disability is this, but I can do this. We turn it. So we'll say, you know what? I have visual impairments. So that does limit me sometimes, depending on the screens, but I've learned to be adaptable. I've learned to ask. That's why I work well with teams. So I just took what I know is maybe a limitation, but I weaved it right into where my strengths are, where my uniqueness is, the skills that I have gained because of having this disability. And then it goes into describing it as a significant part of your life that goes into your career journey. So not just like, hey, I visually, my sight is not great. And that's been something I have championed throughout my education and going into my career. I have learned to leverage new technology. So it did not scare me when the pandemic happened. These are those fun parts you can talk about how it was significant. But again, instead of it seeming like, give me a shot, like I could do the work good, you're saying I will do the work good because I'm already doing great things with already work within my limitations. And then how it may benefit this role. Now, this is like high level. So usually, especially with any of my students across the board, it's the idea that we don't beg for the job, we present who we are for the job. And so this is where you start looking at whatever your disability is as a superpower in many ways, because there's other things. Maybe I can't see a screen clearly, but I can hear well, I listen, I take extra time to make sure my tasks are done. I have great attention to detail. These things benefit a role. So this is kind of where we want to help navigate when we're preparing for an interview, not explaining. So let me tell you how different. We don't explain our disability. We present the strengths and skills that we have that we've combined with our disability. So I want you to kind of, it's a different perspective, but it's one that will help you in the longevity. So know that we are not explaining disabilities. We are connecting our strengths and the uniqueness that we hold with the disabilities that we have in the positions we're applying for.
All right, and now talking about work versus school, because the process for receiving accommodations is quite different going from an academic setting to a work setting. So at this point, you have found a company that that you feel would be a really great fit for you. You've gone through the interview process and you've gotten the job. And so now what? To receive the accommodations that you need to successfully do your job. So accommodations in a school setting are, of course, you go through the Office of Disability Services, my office, and you self-identify as a person with a disability, and you submit any documentation required as evidence of that disability and the accommodations that would be most helpful for you. And that always comes from a qualified professional. And so in a work setting, you go through human resources. And sometimes there will be a staff member in HR who is specifically works on accommodations. This would typically be called like an ADA accommodation specialist or something like that. However, that's not super common. Sometimes you'll also work with like the benefit specialist. So it really just depends, but you always go through human resources, and you do have to submit documentation from a qualified professional again. Sometimes companies may have paperwork that they want your qualified professional to fill out. Other times it's just a letter that you need to have written and submitted to the office talking about the accommodations you need. And again, you do not have to disclose any more detail than what you are comfortable with anyone else in the work setting. So it's just the documentation that you submit to HR. And you receive the accommodations, and you do not have to disclose anything that you're not comfortable disclosing with anyone else.
And the big part about that is the difference. So this is where I want you to be mindful of the roles that you are applying for, because some roles, like again, if I'm just using visual impairment, if there's an accommodation with a screen, okay, that may be very accommodating for that company. But say, for instance, you have more of a neurological disability or difference or whatever uniqueness, this is where you want to take into consideration. That's why we say that company's culture, because we know that people scale disabilities differently. We know that they're all champions, you all are superheroes, but companies can scale them differently. So that's why they're going back to a very part of researching that company's culture, because what if yours is sensory? Maybe it's like sensory, like I can't overload a sensory, just really shuts me down. But this company is an open environment. It is a PR company. There's only so much that they could accommodate because of the culture of their job. So this is where I want you to differ. A school setting is we have to create that environment. With employers, they have to create a sense of equality, not necessarily equity. When I say that, that means that it has to be fair, but doesn't mean that it's fair to you all the time, but it has to be fair money. So that's something that when one-on-one we can talk about, because every disability has its own uniqueness. So I do want you to understand, like in school settings, it's like mandatory. Like first of all, we want to champion and do that, but each company will have its own perspective on how far they can accommodate. And so we can talk about what those look like too, whenever you need those chances to.
And kind of shifting gears a little bit here, we just wanted to talk about some different resources and potentially job boards that you can look at when researching different job options. And so these are just kind of some that we pulled together. So as far as job searching and career development, there's a website called Ability Jobs, and that's actually a job board specific to people with disabilities. So companies will post job openings on this job board with the intention of hopefully hiring someone with a disability, or just saying we are a very inclusive and open company. We really value diversity, we value the different skills people bring, and so we want to be very open to people with disabilities applying for this role. There's also Career One Stop, which has a list of resources for job seekers with disabilities. So that just has a wide variety of resources that you can check out. And then the Balanced Careers actually has a list of verified accommodating jobs and employers. So they have reviewed a lot of different companies and sites and things like that, and have found the jobs and employers that they deem to be the most accommodating from what they could find. And so those may be some great options for you to check out. And then utilizing LinkedIn is definitely a great resource, and I'll let Jackie kind of talk about why that is from a career perspective.
So the other sites, and the reason you see ability jobs, career one stop, the balanced careers, the idea is that these resources have already kind of tailored. So that means that these companies are going to be accommodating. That's the focus. Now, when we say LinkedIn, see LinkedIn, I want you to think of LinkedIn as my whole perspective. Typically, when we're applying for jobs, it's the idea of nerve. It's like I'm trying to be the best. I want to make sure they really want me to work at their company. Like again, so this nervousness. So with LinkedIn, you can apply for jobs, but it's not that the jobs on LinkedIn are accommodating, it's the fact that now you get to control the entire perspective. So that goes from in your about me, you may say, I have top skills A, B, C, D, and E, and I do all this by also being. So again, the power of disclosing how you choose to. It also allows for them to see who you are as a professional before they see a disability. Again, we are aware, like at jobs, if we physically cannot do the work, then we have other roles, that's what these other sites are for, that can be more accommodating. But when we start talking about just applying for jobs, we don't want the first perspective is, please give me the job. I know I have a disability. See, LinkedIn gets us kind of away from there and it gets us into the perspective, like I get to build my professional self. And one thing is it helps you as an individual, present yourself so that when recruiters and HR managers or teams are looking for candidates, that is a selling point because it comes with its own strengths. And I know that's hard to hear when you're like, oh, it's hard because every day I am having different challenges that are exhausting and I'm over it. But those same challenges also build a skill set that not everyone is going to have. And so again, I like to take the perspective of controlling the narrative. I do not want someone to tell my story. I want to have the power to present my story. And then when we sit down, we talk more, we can dive into more of those details. So that is why I like LinkedIn in conjunction with the other ones. But LinkedIn is where you can again build who you are professionally, the whole picture. So not just saying I have a disability, give me a shot, but hey, I do this work every day. And these are some skills that I've built. And again, not this inspirational, we were talking about this inspirational, wow, but more of like, I've developed skills that if I can navigate these environments, these are skills that I built that I know I can translate that right into the work that will be done at your company. And so that's why LinkedIn is a big one. It just helps you control the narrative. And also when someone's putting a name, and let's be honest, about 85% to 90% of our recruiters right now are utilizing LinkedIn. They're wanting to get a feel, like right now where no one's in person, so we're in this virtual space. So LinkedIn helps that picture, that realness, that this is their skills, this is their strengths, who they're connected to. So it's just one of those things, so again, helping you build that narrative.
And kind of the last piece of like resources and job boards and things like that we wanted to talk about is programs specifically for people with disabilities. So some companies have programs like this, such as Microsoft. They have a neurodiversity hiring program. So these are programs where companies will specifically hire people with a certain disability or a certain type of disability, like neurodiversity. So that can be like ADHD, autism, specific learning disabilities, things like that. So these do exist. They're not super common, but they are out there. And so we just wanted to talk about some of the benefits of these programs and why it may be a good option for you, or it may not be, just from what you're really looking for with your career. So one of the benefits is that it's kind of an automatic indicator that the company is committed to having a diverse workplace. If they have taken the time to build this program specifically for people with disabilities, they are really championing that and wanting that to be part of their culture. And it's a true celebration and inclusion of people with disabilities for that same reason. They are really taking the time to be like, yes, we value what you bring and we want you here. And it can also be a great option for people with disabilities who may need or want more coaching or assistance with their first job out of college or starting their career. Because a lot of these programs, they not only have you in this role and performing these tasks and having this job, but also they provide extra coaching or assistance and things like that along the way to really build up your skill set so that you can not only be successful there, but continue on past that as well and take all of these skills with you to your next role. And it also just brings unique opportunities that you may not have at other companies. Especially, I know like the Microsoft Neurodiversity Hiring Program, they have so many opportunities for their employees in that program. And it's just a really unique experience and can bring a lot of great things from it. And I see we've got a question.
So it says, how would I know if a company has this kind of program? So this is where, one, you want to know your job titles. So we don't look for the company necessarily the program first. We want to look for the job titles, because the job titles then lets us know what type of companies. Once you find the company, usually on the company's websites, any company's website where their career tabs, it'll say careers, it'll say opportunities. You're going to see, once you click on that, that's what we call hidden market, where you'll start seeing where they have training programs. I'll give an example. A lot of my techie companies have in-house training programs that you go through for a couple of weeks. After those couple of weeks, you then do like an interview. And if you pass the interview, then you get the actual job. So some of these companies, like with Microsoft, is very similar, like either accommodating the settings, either accommodating the job title, so the type of work, because again, a lot of these programs are going to be very focused in on certain areas. So the one way you can find it is by identifying companies. But we can't identify companies until we identify job titles. So this little shameless plug, but this is why we say schedule appointment and handshake, or we've gotten one better. Schedule some time with Catherine, and what Catherine and us are doing, because we know our systems, handshake is not always the easiest, depending on the software that you're using on the computer. So Catherine's helping us champion if you're wanting to do a job search, because once you find job titles, it's easy to take those job titles, identify companies. Once you identify companies, you identify those opportunities. So does that kind of help answer the question a little bit? You're more than welcome. And that's a great question.
Yeah, that is a great question. Like I said, they're not super common yet, but they're definitely popping up more. And so it's definitely something to look into. And finally, what's next? So, you are currently in college, you're a student, and your goal is to graduate, right? And to graduate well prepared for the next step. But kind of what is that next step? And so Jackie's going to talk about that a little bit more.
So we hear it a lot, like graduate, and that's great. We want graduation. But I know for a lot of my students with disabilities, that's always the big feat. Like, will you graduate? Even with accommodations, are you able to overcome some of those hurdles? And that sometimes becomes a focus where it has to, in all honesty. But this is where in career services, we want to make sure that you also know, like, even with graduation, all the awesome things that you're going to do beyond the university. And this is where we want to talk about. I've had students who want to do motivational speaking. I've had students who want to go in and work with specific areas. And this is where we really want to encourage that impact. So when I say impact, the disability is not the impact. The impact is who you are and the story that you tell alongside your disability, or how your disability has either influenced or built skills, strength, your knowledge. We want to go from more of a strengths perspective versus, okay, I graduate. Now, hopefully a job takes me. It's more like I graduated, great job, but this is the impact I want to have after I graduate. And with that, that is how we start building those plans, because we do want to know what's the next. We know graduation, Catherine and Cindy Suarez, they do an awesome job at making sure that you have those tools to walk across the stage. And even walk across the stage, you're going to make sure you get across the stage comfortably. So our job is to make sure that you understand that we want to talk about who you are, your impact, your skills, your knowledge, your strengths, so that when employers meet you, that's what they're seeing. They're seeing that this is the impact I want to have. And also it helps our students know, like, it's not the end. We don't believe like, oh, wow, you just got a degree, great job. No, we believe that you're, as any other student, are the future leaders. You could be future doctors, you could be future motivational speakers, you could be future caseworkers, social worker, wherever that is. We want to make sure that we're talking about those next steps. So it doesn't stop with the idea, because we talked about it, like, at least you graduated. We don't want that idea. And so whatever that may be, we just want to make sure that you have a next step plan, and maybe that is just a step plan, and that's okay too. Be like, hey, I just need to graduate. That's it. That is okay too. But we just want to make sure that we're accommodating both.
And so now we just want to see if there's any questions that we could answer. about what we talked about today or anything else related to job searching with a disability that we didn't talk about, because there's so many things that you can talk about with this topic, and this was only part of it. So we just want to open it up to any questions that you may have.
Also, any appointments, and again, as I said earlier, our handshake software is not very friendly when it comes to different softwares that read online. And so we understand that's our limitation as an office. So this is where we want you to never hesitate to say, hey, Catherine, I want to meet with Career Services. Could you help get that set up? And what me and Catherine have done is to help with that. We don't want it to be a barrier. We're learning from some of the experts on campus, but know that what we don't know and what we have not been accommodating, never hesitate to let us know. Let Catherine know, hey, Career Services, you know, this information I'm not visibly being able to see well or hear, or it's too busy. Let us know. We want to make sure that your experience is the same as anyone else's experience. And what Catherine has agreed to help us with is like, you come and say, hey, I need to meet with Career Services. She's going to help. If you can do it through handshake, UNT Dallas email, classification, and your major. But if that's just like, Jackie, this website is just not there, don't hesitate to say, hey, Catherine, I want to meet. So please, please, please know that you can reach out to us through Catherine or over just emailing us. We just want to make sure that you are supported, because we know, we are aware our websites can be a little better, and we're getting there with the help of experts. But in the meantime, please know that we're still here for your career development. And if we don't, do we have any questions? If we don't, that is totally okay. It is totally okay, no questions. We like to be mindful of time. So I have about 12:32. Are there any questions, anything anyone else may need to know about?
Or if anything comes up after this, or if there's a question that you didn't feel comfortable necessarily asking in this like more public forum, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. UNTDisability@untdallas.edu is the best place to contact disability services. And then what is your email address?
Mine would be jacqueline.polk@untdallas.edu. And Bailey's will be bailey.bracken@untdallas.edu. It is on our page. If you just type in Google UNT Dallas Career Services, you will get all of our email addresses right on the front page, if that helps out. And even if you call the Student Affairs Suite, they will get you connected to us. So anything Student Affairs, you just start connecting, they'll get you over to us. But nevertheless, we thank you for your time. We appreciate you all logging in and being patient with our technology difficulties. But nevertheless, we thank you all, and we hope to see y'all soon at other programs.